America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, did you get a roll call?
Yes. Director Asner. Here. Director Moore. Here. Director Sartorius.
Here.
Director Sue. Here. Stevens.
Here.
Vice President Cuneo.
Here.
President Patro.
Here. First on our agenda is 2.01, the Early Childhood Special Education Overview.
Good evening, everyone. It's not afternoon anymore. Vice President Dr. Cuneo, President Dr. Macklin, directors, as well as my colleagues, thank you for being here tonight. I am Shakita Moore, and I will be co-presenting with my colleague to my left, Stacey Sturdivant, Director of Early Childhood Special Education Services. Before you should have some information. We want to ensure that you are prepared for this work study session today. Each of you should have a marker as well as Post-it notes. You should have a packet for early childhood special education. There and follow. Awesome. The next thing that you should have on the top is your activity work study sheet for tonight. Are you following? This will be your guide for you to capture questions and notes from our work tonight. We ask that you please use this document as you leave here today as board members to support members of our community with insight in the area of early childhood special education. We will get started with our presentation for tonight. All right. So the outcomes of today's work study session will include, and I'm going to look in front of me instead of at that screen because it's very far away. Understanding early childhood special education services that are provided by special school districts, being able to understand the difference between coalition as well as non-coalition districts, understanding the process for referral, for evaluation, knowing the placement options offered at SSD for students who receive early childhood special education services, understanding the instructional delivery and practices that we offer, knowing what the introduction to school looks like for students and families, as well as gaining insight on future actions. We want to ensure that as board members, you have the ability to connect with stakeholders and that this information is valuable for you to be effective in your role. Moving to the next slide. We did some fact checks, some history, and we wanted to just see, like, where did this start? How did early childhood special education evolve? And so what we know in 1876, Child Check, which was an early childhood service supporting for 3 to 4-year-old students with disabilities, was created by SSD. The first work experience training site was opened at St. John's Hospital, which is now Mercy, and that was in 1978. We also, through our research, found that Child Development Act of 1984 mandated screening services and parent education for birth to 5 individuals. In 1990, Missouri mandated FAPE, which is free and appropriate public education to children ages 3 through 5 years old with disabilities. And then in 1976, 48 years ago, early childhood special education grant funds were provided and established at SSD, both state and federal, to support early childhood special education services. We also know that researchers have found universal preschool enrollment for children in poverty could close up to 20% of the Black-white school readiness gap and up to 36% of the Hispanic-white gap. And we wanted to capture this information because at the same time we're looking at those gaps, we also have to look at the readiness of students who receive special education services, and we have to ensure that we're captured in this work as well. Next slide. This is the part where it gets a little tricky, understanding coalition and non-coalition districts. And so you're going to do some work in this area today to ensure that you are equipped to know within the areas that you serve, your sub-districts as board members, as board directors, you are aware of those districts that are coalition as well as non-coalition districts. There are 8 coalition districts. These districts provide and operate their own early childhood special education programs. They have direct control of funding, as well as being responsible for programming for both general education as well as special education. These coalition districts are provided with support from special school districts in the area of low incidence services, and some of those have been listed there for your review. As well as we want to ensure that we have service agreements with them to meet the needs of families based on child care locations. There are additional partnerships that also exist, and this is with the YWCA as well as Urban League, and these are our community partners, and we have 5 direct center locations as well as additional child care centers that we support throughout St. Louis County and this region. Next slide. This slide here provides you with a little bit more information about our partnerships and service agreements. I know that we've received a few questions in this area, and we want to ensure that we're able to provide you as much information as possible. And so through our partnerships, there are 14 partner early childhood school districts. Those are the districts that we provide special education services for. There are 22 school district buildings where we provide those supports and 1 Head Start building location. And there are about 90 private child care centers throughout our region that we support through partnerships. Our reciprocal service agreements are annual, and they provide services in non-resident districts. I know that that was another question that we had been prompted earlier too, and we can definitely allude to more if needed. So please be sure to capture those questions as we go through this work study session today. In the 8 St. Louis Coalition districts, agreements are for services in any placement setting, and it also allows for those students to receive transportation as a related service. We also have additional agreements for transportation as a related, additional agreements with districts outside of St. Louis County, and these are for itinerant level placement only. And we'll talk a little bit more about itinerant level placement later in this presentation.
So if you would look at the map that's provided, and there's a larger copy in your packet, it does show the color, by color coding. I'm visual, as many people are. And so each coordinator, some are joining here today. Thank you guys for being present. They each are color-coded by what districts that they supervise, and all of the gray districts are coalition districts. So what occurs is if one of the gray coalition districts listed there has a resident who is attending child care in one of our districts or vice versa, and they need transportation due to us typically having a half day of programming, we will reach out with one another to find out if they are able to provide those services. So for instance, if someone is attending Overland Head Start, that is in Pattonville School District. If one of our Rittner students are attending there, we will reach out and ask them if they would be able to provide those programming services, and then they would be able to get the education through Pattonville School District. If someone is attending child care from outside of St. Louis County, and they are only at an itinerant level, that means that they would probably only receive 60 minutes of speech, or they might receive up to 3 hours of services maximum. We only have that same level of agreement for itinerant service. If a family is able to transport their students, then by all means, we request that you come back to your home district so we can build that connection. You'll be able to connect with students who might be moving on with you later on, who you might see in your neighborhood. So that is one of the reasons that we do have that partnership and those service agreements with other districts. So now, we would like you guys to break out into a couple of groups. So next slide.
Can I ask a quick question? Can you give me a concept of numbers? Yes, sure.
Numbers of students, we'll get to that.
Okay, thank you.
Clarifying question. And the coalition is based on
We have our partner districts, which are the 14 districts that SSD serves, and coalition are the 8 districts that SSD does not serve for early child. So for this activity, we will have you guys go, you can pick one of the 3 boards, and we are going to have you sort to see if you can recall which ones are coalition and non-coalition districts. So we need 3 groups of 2 to 3 board directors, and you can pick your space and area, and we're going to come up and join you.
I think they're cheat sheet.
Sure, cheat sheet.
This is your opportunity.
I mean, I do need my.
Please bring your resources with you. All right, so we have 3 sections, the same information is in each area, and you can divide into, put your cards over to the left of each of your boards, and you'll be able to sort out. You have cheat sheets, but you have number of documents. All right, so you
Everybody went with you. Yeah, these are the ones that are, wait, I heard
And remember your numbers, how many coalition districts do we have, how many non-coalition districts do we have? 8, we have 8.
Have a big seat.
Yeah.
Any face that you want to support.
All right, does anyone need any help? All right, we have one group that's done. Do you need a resource? All right, your resource. Why that's not.
Call it coalition.
That's okay. All right, you got it. You should have 8 on this side and 14 on this side. And so I'm like, which I mean, when I started, they're not.
Coalition is.
That's where coalition are not, those are outside. All right. All right, we're gonna give them about 1 more minute and then we'll be ready to transition back. Go ahead. That's for because we all. So
That was.
We made it.
All right, okay. So thank you for your participation and a little bit of hands-on learning there. So we'll go to our next slide. And we're going to talk,
I think that there were a few questions. Do we need to capture any questions at this point before we advance? Did we respond to all questions?
These, coalition, which actually comes through special school district and then to them,
no,
or does it go directly to them?
it goes
directly. Yes, go ahead, Seth.
So they interact directly with DESE. Our department supports the 14 that we have on our side of the board, and each of them, they individually have their contacts on how they will interact. So it all goes directly to them. So they're able to submit the documentation that is due. They are reimbursed directly, and then so they receive all of that directly to DESE.
Now, does our tier funding affect that at all? So we talked about different levels that separate, that school age as opposed to early childhood.
Correct.
I've got a question, or I had a question. No, I was interrupting you with it. Do the coalitions have SSD teachers, or they have their own teachers?
They have their own teachers. So each of those 8 districts hires their own teachers. They determine how they would do their evaluations. Everything that we'll discuss today, they have their own version of that, except for the low incidence that we provide some supports for. So we provide the teachers of the deaf, hard of hearing. They, in our early childhood department, we have 2 who are solely ours, and then sometimes the school age team will have to help them because they're trying to support 22 districts. That could get a little busy. And then so we also provide the support for the visually, teachers of the visually impaired. We will also support our ALCOM department. We have our own ALCOM team, but they will provide some support. In some districts, they've built up a big enough need that they are still starting to touch on that themselves.
So child coalition, employers will have their own special needs teacher, but then when they take kindergarten, then they're an SSD.
Okay.
Okay.
Good question. So when we look at the very first step, it's the referral process. And so when families have concerns, what do they do to reach out? How can they obtain those supports from us? And frequently, everyone knows special school districts, so I receive a lot of phone calls. When I receive these phone calls, I reach for my handy-dandy book and I say, what district do you guys live in? And then that's how I either say, you live in Hazelwood, this is the phone number you need to call, or you live in Jennings, this is the phone number you need to call, and then able to provide them that support. So keep that handy, build those connections so that we're able to support no matter what district you are to get the families to where they need to be. Next slide. So this is a very simplified process view of the referral. So parents will have concerns, and there are 2 ways that you can proceed. You can do a parent referral, or you can do an agency referral. No matter which method you use, you will end up at the same endpoint. The evaluation teams that we have will review the referral packet. They will determine if there's suspicion of a disability, and they will proceed. I want to express that there's a correction in this box. These are all agencies that help to complete parent referrals. Our parent referral process has a different timeline in how they receive the information. It is sent directly to the parents. They're able to fill out any concerns that they may have, and they can return that information. Missouri First Steps is a program, it's an early intervention program that works with students birth through 3. So they also have a process that DESE has set up about when they can communicate to school districts and how they will share that information. And then our partner districts, the parents and teachers are very strong advocates. They are very good support for us, as well as our Head Start program. Next slide, please.
I've got a question.
Yes.
Sorry. So parent referrals is parents saying, I think my child may have autism. Agency referral is they've already done this before 3 years old, and they already are with one of these 3 first steps.
They are attending a preschool. So someone is attending at Parkway Early Childhood Center, and Parkway says, we've noticed we have some concerns about how your little one is holding their pen, or we think that there seems to be some sounds that they're saying that aren't age appropriate. So we would like your permission to go ahead and fill out this referral packet, and then they'll sit down with the parents, and together they'll fill out that referral packet, and then they have a process to get that to us.
What percentage of these kids are coming to us from First Steps? Large percentage?
Large percentage, I would say, no, but more and more. There seems to be a lot of them. We have.
I mean, that's one that are being identified extremely early. That's what I was wondering.
First Steps is a family intervention program, so they come from a family standpoint of what does the family need, what are some interventions that we can provide in home. So we do not always have students who are receiving services through First Steps who meet eligibility for us as a school district. So it doesn't always overlap. A little later on in the packet, we will touch on some numbers in terms of how the trends have gone, but in terms of what we see lately, we see a lot more of the parent referrals than we do agency referrals, because the parents are just, they're reacting a lot faster. Yes?
What about organizations like Delta Gamma Center for Children? Get into one of the agency referrals then, or is that more of a parent working with that organization? Or you kind of wondering how that all, only because I used to be on their board, so.
They work with the parents, and a lot of times they will reach out and help provide those connections to get them to us. And then there have been times where they've been, a wealth of information that we're able to use. So we definitely like to build those connections with those types of.
But it's not considered an agency.
No, that would be a parent referral. They would help the parents complete that.
I'm not familiar with that.
Delta Gamma Center for Visually Impaired Children, it's on Brentwood Boulevard. They've been around for years. I was one of the first male board members ever for the organization. And it's a sorority supported program, birth to 3, and visually impaired. Now, they could have all other impairments also, but vision's their main focus.
Okay, so on our next slide, we have 7 evaluation teams that are exclusively part of our early childhood department. So if you look over this slide, you'll see how they're broken out. They are assigned different districts and different areas, so they can provide those supports throughout our county. And as well, there are other departments such as the ABA department, our applied behavior analysis team, the blind and visually impaired. They also provide some support for any student who might need any of those services. Next slide, please. For our students who are coming to us, the number 1 eligibility criteria that they meet is young child with a developmental delay, or YCDD, and it looks at more of a global development of your child. So they look at the areas that are listed here: your cognition, adaptive behavior, social emotional behavior, physical, fine and gross motor, and communication. When we look at speech, that is its own separate category, so that is also something that we would take into consideration at that time. They do look at the mean where they have the average of where students are developing. And if we see that there's one area that does have that mild delay, then we will say, oh, we think that you can work on that a little bit more. But if we do see one area that has that moderate delay, then we say, let's go ahead and provide those services. If there are two areas that both have that mild level of concern, we want to provide interventions as early as possible. We also do make sure that there's no factor of them being an English language learner, so that that isn't something that's under consideration. And then we do have professional judgment, which DESE recognizes, but we try and use sparingly, so that isn't something that is just used just because. Next slide, please. So our evaluation teams use play-based evaluations. They've had trainings, they've had refreshers, and so over at the Learning Center, 6 of our teams are housed. Our 7th team is housed in Afton. All of our teams have their own testing area. It is set up like a miniature classroom. Off of each miniature classroom, there's a quiet room where if they need to come in and hear the student and be able to get a little more of the language sample, they do have that opportunity where they're still close to their family, because sometimes the students are like, bye, Mom, and they go, and sometimes they're like, where are my parents? Do not take me away from them. So the family is involved. They're in that room. The staff is able to interact with the student, able to talk with the parent, get a feel for everything that's going on. And so we do use that play-based observation to get an overview of all the skills that the students are able to do. Here are a couple of pictures of some of our centers, our classrooms, and in addition, we have a gross motor area and the fine motor opportunity for them to pull out and do it. Slide, please. So here's one where we are looking at our evaluation trends, and as you'll see, our initial evaluations have gone up. We have, from the last 5 years, the data that we have the number of initial evaluations, the number who have met eligibility, the number of students who are not eligible, and the number of referrals that the teams have rejected for various reasons, as well as the number of first steps. Dr. Cooney, you'll see in the past year or so, our first steps have gone down somewhat. Some of the reasons that we might have for the referrals that are rejected, these are ones where after review of the information, there is no suspicion of a disability. Or it also could be sometimes we send the information directly to the parents, we go through the timelines and the processes. If we don't get the information back, then even after multiple attempts to contact them, we will end with that process. What we have learned for a number of our students who are not eligible is that there's been an increase in sound system referrals, and the criteria for that doesn't actually begin until the age of 3. So if they come to us from the first steps, there isn't an actual delay at that time. So if there isn't enough to suspect anything for us to support, we might hold off on that, but look at other areas. And then also, we've also seen an increase of referrals from parents. And I did present, my first year here was during COVID, and I do think that COVID did have that impact where a lot of times families were at home, we weren't interacting with everyone, even some of our family members as much. And so we are starting to see some of the students who have been at home a little bit, and now that they're coming back out, hopefully we'll see them thrive. Next slide, please.
So this is our opportunity to check in quickly in the section that we just covered. I believe that many of you asked questions, but just to ensure that all were answered. Are we ready to move on?
Years ago, it was that kids had to have 2 areas of concern. That was the case. So let's take vision to the area.
We have a student who meets eligibility for visual impairment. They will receive the services that they need underneath that criteria. So for a young child with a developmental delay, if you have a mild concern in just your language communication skills, then you would not meet eligibility. But if you had language and fine motor, you would meet eligibility, and we would address that. If you had a moderate concern in just language, then we would address that. So now you can, depending on the level of need,
Right.
for just one
So
area.
it's not just having 2 separate areas of concern. How significant
Yes.
you are.
Remember, right back on the slide, it was if you had one, it'd be 2 standard deviations away. If you had two, you had to be 1.5 away on each. What standardized measures are being used? What testing measures?
We use a variety of tests. We might use the, oh, you're gonna ask me all of the acronyms. Like, we might use the.
For cognition, we use the brief, we use rating scales, the BASC, adaptive scales, it just depends on the area. For language, PLS, the clinical assessment of phonological areas. We have hundreds that we can choose from, and we just individualize it based on. So we, by law, we're required to start starting students on their third year. What happens, and this is, you don't have to go into this, because it's not really hard. What happens when
They would be served by first step if they did have an evaluation by them and they met the criteria, they would be providing services from birth up until their third birthday. The only caveat that they have is that they do allow for summer birthdays. So if someone will be turning 3 over the summer, the family, if they are going to have, there's a window of opportunity where the family can choose to stay with First Step until the fall, when they will be able to start with us, as opposed to saying, oh, you turned 3 in May, and then you didn't have any.
Right, thank you. That's nice. My son started services too, in Illinois, and his birthday was July 23rd, so July 23rd, school started preschool. But, you know, luckily it was only one, but, that's nice. But, yeah, go through the state program, you're like, not a ward of the state, but, you know, the state takes care of you until 36 months. School district takes care of you until 21. You're back to the state again.
So with programming basics, this is just, to give you some of those numbers. We have both December 1 count as well as the highest count. If I am correct, the highest count is a student who has been provided a service at some particular point in time. They may be with us or they may have transitioned out of, our service, delivery areas. And so you'll be able to see those numbers captured for each of those as mentioned, and we looked at those trends from 1920 all the way to current 24-25. And so you can see some of the highlights. You can see the number of increase of students that we are providing services to after COVID, and how those numbers have continued to increase drastically from the 22-23 to the 24-25 when you take a look at the December 1.
So you're seeing a lot more kids with COVID. I know First Steps, when they come, they usually go right into the house, actively are able to work with the kids. I would assume COVID changed a lot of that. Yeah, they go in and really deal with those kids. So maybe some of that increases because now we're going back and identifying more kids.
I do think that could be a factor.
Who provides the First Step teacher?
First Step hires their entire staff. So they provide, they run their own program, they have their guidelines, so they are separate from us.
They don't steal our teachers.
We sometimes steal theirs.
That's okay.
And then sometimes when someone retires, they may decide, I'll go and do that just so I can stay in contact with children.
Yeah.
We don't steal, we just offer. Yeah, we borrow.
Offer, you offer.
All right, awesome. All right, and so the next slide, on slide 16, these are some of the placement and program settings that we have. We have the early childhood setting where we provide services in the early childhood setting. We also have the early childhood special education setting. We provide services within the home, residential facilities, itinerant services outside of the home, part-time early childhood as well as part-time early childhood special education, and as well as separate schools. So those are all of the sets.
Actually, the red ones, residential facility and separate schools, are ones that we do not offer here. When I started in the nineties, we did have early childhood classrooms in some of the special education buildings. It was decided that that was too restrictive, that we should participate more in our local school districts and have that opportunity, so we did phase out those classrooms. So we had that at one point, but we don't at this current moment. I taught in a classroom at Akron, and we had a wing. It was the early childhood wing. Then we'd go, and then everyone would be like, "Oh, look, it's the early childhood," and we were like, "Yeah, oh, we know, you want our autograph."
Do we start with the text?
No, we do not right now. They have gen ed programs in the tech schools that they are able to then work with the students who are supporting them. At one point, we did have some classrooms there, but due to numbers decreasing, we were able to absorb them back into their school district.
Do we have any programs that have normal? Developing in our special education.
So if you look down here, the early childhood special education setting, we will have what is an integrated classroom. So as a teacher of special education, I still have students without IEPs who can be enrolled into my program. I have more students with IEPs than without IEPs because it is a special education setting, and then I have that opportunity to support those students and to work with them in that setting. And then also another setting that we sometimes will have is the part-time early childhood special education, where it will be team taught. And if a student only receives services from a teacher, that's considered an early childhood setting. But if they do also receive services from a speech pathologist, an occupational therapist, then that is what will make it part-time. Because part of the time they're in that larger group setting, and part of the time they'll pull out and still work in a smaller group.
Section, curriculum and instruction.
The curriculum and instruction, next slide, please. There are 7 curricula that DESE has approved for early childhood special education. For all of the districts that we have, a lot of them do use Project Construct, which we consider to be a framework. It's very much student-centered to allow them to have more voice and more participation. So try and combine some of the adult direction with some more of the student direction and give them that guidance. And then we do also have a couple of districts who are doing Reggio. It was developed in Italy, and so they will go and be trained in that, and then they will come back and use some of those as well. The column all the way on the right are some modifications that we use for a lot of our students, and the majority of these that are listed are to provide some of those social-emotional supports for some of our students. Next slide, please. So when we talk about play-based instruction, what we do does still bring about development for our students. Play is an essential component, and if you look at all the things that you are able to learn there, it's basically working on creativity, it's working on problem solving, sharing, we're working on executive function skills, we're working on motor skills, we're building and helping support the curiosity of our students, as well as working on self-regulation. So it covers all of the areas that we would want a student to develop. And when you're 3 years old, when you're 4 years old, even when you're 5, when you play, that is your work. So when they come to school, they're working, and we're helping them to do that through play. Next slide, please.
What it looks like a day,
Go ahead, Stacy.
when I want to have fun with my friends, I wiggle my tail and dive right in.
After we evaluate children for our 3 to 5 program, Many of them will go into or be served in our early childhood special education classrooms. And those classrooms look very much like a typical preschool classroom. They come in, they may do free play, have a circle time, they do art activities and gym or playground time, as well as snack times. My name is Kim Smith. I'm an occupational therapist, and I work at Northwest Regional ESD, and I've been here about 16 years, and right now I'm on our evaluation team. I'm the motor specialist on our evaluation team, and I work with a number of teachers and speech and language pathologists.
Bull. Bull. Yes. Yes. There's things that you just need the chair. Yeah. This is how we listen.
Oh, look at that. Say fish on. Fish on. Fish on, Wesley. He got a fish on. Say here. Yay. Yeah.
And during those activities, children are learning lots of different skills. They may be working on grasp patterns, creative skills, communication skills, and attending. So they may be having to attend for short periods of time. During the playground or gym activities, they're working on balance and coordination. Again, they are probably working on social skills, especially if a teacher has organized a group activity for the kids to do. So really throughout the day, they're working on lots of different skills, even though it looks like play.
And I want to have fun with
B caseloads for early childhood are mandatory, and they are tied to funding requirements. So we are paid in arrears. So we are getting ready to submit all of our documentation, our caseloads. Every position in the early childhood department, my position, secretaries, every single position that we have is mandated by caseloads. So they have documentation where we submit that, where we are able to provide information if we have someone who worked for us during ESY, who didn't work during the regular school year, so notification that we're able to provide that. Program information is captured, so they ask how many districts we support, if they're in a K-12 building, if they're in an early childhood building. In the majority of our districts, every district that we support does have an early childhood center. However, when we are in Lindbergh, they have grown to the point where they have 2 buildings. They have early childhood main, and then they have the West Center. And then when we go to Parkway, there are like 9, 10 buildings. We now opened one up in the high school, so then I'm like, okay, you guys are definitely going to be popular because you're going to have a high schooler who's so excited to see the preschooler and the preschooler who's like, look at that big kid. So it just gives us more opportunities to interact. And then in addition to that, due to our unique partnerships with our local districts, part of the funding that we receive does go back to each of them to support the programs that we have there. So next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we have caseload requirements for each of our positions, from teachers of the early childhood special education classroom down to our social workers, our administrators, our secretaries.
Seems like a very large number.
So we have half-day programming in order to look at our students for the majority of our classrooms. because those young threes, they still need to nap. The general education, they come from a childcare where they're able to, perspective, that lens, where they're able to provide that instruction in the morning and then allow the students to nap so that they're able to get that full day. In order to reach more students, we have a morning session and an afternoon section. So when you get to 20, it's typically someone who has 10 and 10. Or also because we have the rolling early eligibility of those third birthdays, we will start off, and typically we're like, someone will go, oh, you don't have that many students, and I'm like, come back in 6 weeks. And then by the end of the year, you're like, so here's some chocolate, there's a new student coming. And they're like, what? And we're like, always open, always here for our little ones. So it grows as we go.
Funding's a year behind. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And the monies that we pay, are we dispersed to the districts, are they a year behind too?
Yes. So we finished all that up, and then we're able to include that. It is included in the federal expenditure report that we submit to DESE for what we have. We pay them, and then we get reimbursed for that.
How do we handle that then in our budget then? Each year, is it about the same every year?
I'll learn. It's an accrual-based budget, modified accrual budget, so we'll have to take some of that into consideration.
I mean, if it's an accrual, I was trying to figure out how that works with an accrual-based budget.
That's why it looks like we have more money than what we do. That money's not brought in and not paid out.
Right.
Yet. And so it gives a false impression sometimes on the amount of money we have.
How much money are we talking? Because I'm trying to think of the budget because accrual, I'm trying to figure out how this would work in an accrual budget.
Trying to make sure I understand your question. So you're just wanting to make sure, how do we budget for the accrual-based revenue?
Yeah.
Can I come back to you on that?
No, I'm not trying to be smart. I'm trying to wrap my head around it. I'm trying to figure out how to make it work.
I'll be honest, SSD is the first accrual budget I've ever seen or experienced.
Okay. No, I was just trying to figure out how that works, and it just couldn't, it didn't make sense to me. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have one quick question. I meant to ask this earlier. What is itinerant?
So if you look at the different types of classroom, a teacher of an early childhood special education classroom, that is typically a self-contained classroom, or it might be that integrated classroom. That is room that has been established for students who have IEP. If you have a teacher who has an integrated group, we are the traveling teacher. So when I was an itinerant teacher, I went to North County Head Start to serve students who might be there. If I was attending Parkway, I may go into the Parkway General Education programs and show those students what they might need in that larger group setting, or if it's something that they need to work on in a smaller group, I might pull them out with some students and we might work together. It also may be a case of someone whose parents bring them up for a session if they aren't enrolled in there, and so they are our version of a resource. So for itinerant services, DESE says it's typically about 3 hours or fewer of services. After that, we should consider a classroom setting. So do you need to be in a classroom for 2 days a week? Do you need to receive more services so that you have more of a continuation? So these are students who they still need a little bit of support, so then we're able to provide that.
Okay.
And then for our low incidence, those are typically students who might have more significant needs, like our medically fragile students, or students who might have very intense behaviors. And so those will be smaller settings that we will be able to provide some of those same supports in.
That was his question. And on that note, there's no, like a lot of preschools, you have to be potty trained. You don't have that rule, right?
We do not.
Our kiddos.
Oh.
We do not. Our partner districts may, so there may be times where we have a student who may be between two programs, and they may say, oh, they're not potty trained, they aren't able to be enrolled because that is something that they've written. But for us, we're like, Stacy needs more pull-ups, please send them in. And we have changing tables, and if we need to adapt, we work with the students and the families.
That's fun. I'm all that stuff on. Oh, our kiddos do that.
Yep. So this is just a general overview of our staffing. So in terms of what we What we have position-wise is, every position that we have that is assigned to early childhood, then in addition, we pay a portion of some of the ABA administrators. So when we submit that documentation, we look at how many early childhood students are supported by the RBP and the BCBAs, and then that is also accrued there. And then every other position here is someone who is full-time early childhood, or they may be sometimes a therapist who might spend half their time in school age and early childhood, so we will include them as well. Next slide, please. And then, so when we look at transitioning beyond early childhood to school age, we have a process that we communicate with our districts and our partners. So our partner districts, we have documentation that they can review in writing ahead of time. We establish meetings where we can plan ahead. These are students who are coming. These are ones who we suggest that you come in and lay eyes on, just so that you can help be prepared to speak to what their needs are and help keep families informed. And then when we have transition IEPs, we will help prepare for what they might need. We might tell families, it might be good to go up and play on the playground. Then we might take pictures and make stories so that they'll have that as something to review. If it's a student who we know has difficulty with transitions, we might see if we can get pictures of the school so that they can see that and it'll be a familiar building before they go there. So we do try and work with our school-age counterparts when we do that. And in fact, we've already started in many of our districts sharing that information of who will be coming to them next year.
How does that look for the coalition districts versus the non-coalition?
So those coalition districts, they work with their school-age counterparts separate from us. We are not directly involved unless it's a student who we are serving. So if it's one of those students that we are serving, then we will just be able to carry on and do that. However, what they do in coalition districts, if you attend Hazelwood, you have a Hazelwood IEP. If you attend Ferguson-Florissant, you have a Ferguson-Florissant IEP. So they will meet with those school-age counterparts, and they will establish this is the IEP that you will have starting next August. So they will continue to work on their IEP until then, and then transition to SSD and their documentation. Whereas when we meet, we can start, that's what you want us to work on, we'll start working on that now, and it's in that same IEP document.
How's that work? The coalition districts.
I think that sometimes it could be a communication of making sure that we have everything that we need to work on. We actually worked with someone who was in the Aspiring Administrators Program, and she interviewed some people and collected some data. And so we're having a coalition meeting where we're just going to go over those results and be like, here's some suggestions and ideas that we learned from others. And then, like, sometimes someone may say, well, ask me, can you answer this question? And I'm like, of course, and then I'll try and answer that. So even though they aren't necessarily one of the ones I serve, I still try to provide support if I can.
I asked that because I heard a one-off story, right? And you hear one-off stories and you're like, is this the norm or not? But it was essentially a principal in one of the coalition districts that was like, I absolutely feel like these students get lost as soon as they hit my building, and then it's October and we're like, something's not right. How can we support this student and this family? And they're like, oh, well, actually, this transition meeting should have happened. So it just makes me wonder.
We know that there are definitely some opportunities to enhance our practices for districts that we're not providing special education services to, and those students then transitioning to SSD to receive services. We've talked about that in length and conversation, and we know that for future planning, that it is going to be important for us to establish a group of individuals to come together, both coalition, non-coalition, and we've even talked about some of the child care agencies and bringing them to the table to talk about what are your experiences with us, how can we improve, and then how can we ensure that we also have partner district representation at the table as well, too. This kind of goes into the next slide after, 2 slides away from here with that future planning of even integrating some of our work for early childhood into other areas as well.
And I can only speak for one coalition district. And I'd say it worked better the last few years when I was there than on. But I taught kindergarten, so what we would do was talk to special district staff, and we would learn who was coming, who was planning to come from kindergarten. We would go to the early childhood center, one of our teachers would go and observe, and look at the needs and behaviors of those students. And then we as a team would discuss the needs of the kindergarten and what kind of IEP would follow them, and then to try to find the best setting. We placed our own kid in my particular. It's one-time, that's how it works. And I think it works pretty well. You know, we would make days for children to come in, we would have, visiting kindergarten day, encourage the parents and staff to come in with every child, and then if one child is special needs, they encourage them to come in. It's something to hang their mind on. This is where I'm going. To the whole, I know. Well, there.
So go ahead. A clarifying question, to follow along on this. Also, we have a kid in the coalition district who has an IEP, and is now starting kindergarten, and it's October, and they have not yet had their, reevaluation for eligibility for an IEP. They're in kindergarten and anything. Who's providing that child's special education services?
They're in kindergarten at that time?
Yes.
Special school district for the entire county.
SSD is doing it the moment they hit kindergarten, but the IEP itself, at the beginning of kindergarten, was devised by the coalition district.
In partnership with SSD.
In partnership.
They meet with the kindergarten programming team to do that transition. We call them transition IEPs. So we meet with our counterparts, they meet with their counterparts.
That's happening right before. Gotcha. Okay.
And then, so on this slide, we have our program evaluation monitoring report where they were able to collect the information for this past year. And the percent of students who demonstrate growth on our common assessment, which is something we just calibrate. These are developmental milestones and when they might occur. So is it something that a child is doing consistently? Is it something that's beginning to emerge to give us that guidance? We've seen some growth over that with the last 3 years of students tested. We've also seen an increase in the number of students. And so that is a factor, as well as the IEP family survey. And we're a little overly ambitious and we would like to have a 9 out of 10. And so we have seen an increase the past year, but prior to COVID, we were at a higher rate when we were looking at it. And so, but that is one of the things that we're trying to work on when we reach out to our families to find out what supports can we do to provide you that.
Another question, so summer birthdays. So, Hugh's about to graduate from flashbacks from kindergarten. I remember a lot of kids, or a lot of parents of summer birthdays want to hold their kids back a year for emotional growth. And that was Illinois, and we were told, no, if you hold back, then you have to go to a private preschool. You'll get no services for that year until you continue on to kindergarten. Is that true for these kiddos in Missouri, in St. Louis County? Like, your birthday's end of July, can you spend an extra year in that 4-year-old preschool so you're technically fine?
That is a specific question that is addressed on DESE's website, and it says if a parent chooses to hold their child back, by all means, that is their right to do so. However, if we have an IEP team meeting and it is determined that your special education services can be programmed for in that kindergarten setting, then we are obligated to go ahead and develop that. If you choose not to access that, we do have options that we are able to provide our families here at SSD. So if a student decides that they would like to remain back, they could consider, if they're eligible for services through SNAP, if they would like to receive those in the after-school SNAP program, or if they would like to go to that dual enrollment program. If we sit down at the table and we determine that we are not able to program for a student at kindergarten, we will keep them in early childhood, and we are then going to provide those services. So that's it. Yes.
Not
So
even biological.
sometimes it's the parent going, I think he had, and we have that cutoff, and some parents are like, I think he's so close, I think we need to wait. And then we're like, okay, but if they could provide what we need in kindergarten, that's how we will proceed. And so then at that point, we're like, what supports can we help provide for you over the summer to help prepare you, or what you might need to help feel like he will be confident as well, or she.
I know, I mean,
So, and then on this slide, we talk about future programming, and one of the things is we'd like to partner with our DEIA department and have a review of our process and see if there are any recommendations. We would like to maintain equity across the board in our general education, and then in the districts that we are providing those services in, that might also be DISPRO programs, just making sure that we are remaining equitable across that board. And then we would also like to, we have a rollout plan where we would like to start working on charting the life course. We know that that's something that's very important and very family-centered, so we would like to make sure that we have our part of the pie in providing that for families.
What does that look like for a 5-year-old? Are you charting life course for just grade school? I mean, you're not being like, what are they going to be when they grow up, right?
My understanding is that you will still honor that. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a superhero. So as a superhero, you help people. So in order to help people, we need to talk to them and figure out what they need. We might have to clean up because that will help my mom. That will help my teacher. So we would be able to go into it from that perspective. If we have a student who is possibly nonverbal and they aren't able to make that, we might be able to contact the parents with what are some of the things that they like, and then use that as our way to make that connection. And so
you broadly start,
because if we're going to be that introduction, it'll just be familiarizing everyone with that process.
yeah, I love charting.
Thank you for the informative presentation. It sounds like SSD is providing very extensive resources and supports for early childhood services, especially with their non-coalition schools. I asked you earlier when there's movement of non-coalition schools to coalition, and you even described really close partnership in the IEP process. And you said they prefer control. Can you break that down a little bit more, or they're aiming for more control? So
I don't know why they would choose, because that was a decision that their board made.
right.
So my guess is that you're able to have that. For instance, I think in terms of programming, if you are the responsible party for who is hired by this district, you can mandate, some of the districts in the coalition do mandate that their staff are duly certified, general education and special education for early childhood. And so they are able to have more flexibility. If the numbers and the trends show that there are more students who are coming in with IEPs and they have that need, they have more allocation of that staff in order to be able to do that. In our instance, if we have numbers that increase in general education and they need more space, then there's more people who have to come to the table and they have to discuss it, where they are able to say, this is what we're going to do. So in terms of being able to make those more unilateral decisions.
Can we utilize early childhood, the ones in the coalition and the non-coalition? Can we utilize those numbers to predict future population, future students in SSD? And are we doing that?
We talk about students in districts that we do not provide special education services for. How are we capturing the numbers of students enrolled in those programs to support us with planning, future planning for staffing and services?
Those programs are separate from us, so
It would just seem like it would be data it would be a strong correlation. If I have so many people in early childhood, how many kids are going to have that? And it would seem there would be an aid in our planning to make sure how many people we're going to have that. I was just wondering, do we utilize their numbers? If we don't, can we?
We should have some level of use of some numbers or an estimation to support us with service delivery for those that we're not providing services to, because it will support us with the staffing and ensuring effective service delivery.
I was looking at it to figure out,
Correct.
we use those.
And that goes back to the conversation early of bringing those districts together
Right.
at a table, having conversations to plan. Early childhood is doing some great things, and I think that there are opportunities for us to continue to enhance the great things that are taking place within their program by ensuring that through DEIA and other areas that we're bringing individuals to the table to ensure that we're capturing insight and perspective from them that will also help them in their programs that they're providing services to, but most importantly, to ensure that we are ready to receive those students
Do
when they
we,
enter into school age.
the coalition and non-coalition, they talk to each other on a regular basis?
We have regular meetings that,
Good.
and for instance, we call them coalition meetings.
Okay.
So we meet with our partner districts on the regular because we're in their buildings. This morning I was in Riverview. But our coalition districts, we have a meeting scheduled next week. And so I send out the invites and it's expanded beyond, and it is the time for us to calibrate some of the information and decisions that Bessie might have or for us to rely on one another. Because as I was sharing with one of the groups at the board, in those districts, they are the sole special education department. They don't have all the rest of us. So I knew someone who was working in the district, and when she asked them, oh, who can I ask this question, the special education question, they were like, it's you, you're the department. So that's one of the things that we do. We come together. We come together, and I like to call it a brain bank, where we can say, these are some of the things, and we have that opportunity to partner.
Well, I would also like to see it for projections of how many, what type of future enrollment we're going to have with us. That's where I thought it would be.
Anticipated enrollment.
And know how many staff is, way to know budget, and know the students.
Yeah, my question is just about like, equity and access, and like, do we have numbers around, who's accessing programs? And we should be able to access programs. And also I think about, one of my districts specifically, which is Hazelwood, and the concern that I've heard from a lot of parents is that my child isn't getting screened because they don't have enough parents as teachers, screeners, right? So they can't access the program because their children can't get screened, and they're just waiting months and months and months. And I think about, like, how can we, though they are a coalition district, which is why it's frustrating to me, because I'm like, well, why don't y'all just come on this side, and then we can't get, families will have access, right? So it's just like, I don't know what the answer to that is, or what we can do, but I just think at that table, it's at least worth asking the question, because we shouldn't have babies sitting at home on the grandma's couch waiting to be in classrooms when there are seats available to them, but they just can't get screened fast enough to know if they should be in title or tuition-based or in a special education setting. It's disheartening. Yeah.
I have a budget question.
Fred.
As we're looking at this, and we're saying that even our early childhood is supported separately through state monies in the rear, but yet we're providing possibly high-incident support from our staff for these coalition schools. How's that being paid for? So when we bring our staff in for coalition schools, because this is a low-incident kiddo or whatever, do we build up for that?
We include them when we report our caseloads to DESI.
So that gets
So when I do a report to DESI, I say, these are the, we have 2 itinerant teachers of the deaf. They serve, and I literally say, they served 17 students. 4 were from our coalition district, 7 were from our SSD partner district. I still say they reach their caseload by serving all of these students. And they say, okay, thank you.
Well, I think it's pretty nice that the coalition school districts have this backup of us to provide these services. And, I'm not sure how aware they are that, we're the backup and we're providing these services, and they're not providing services for us in any kind of situation, so.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm kind of over your shoulder here. Thank you. First of all, education is my heart, early childhood education is my passion. And I think this is so important, and I thank all of you for the work that you're doing. I'm going to bring up just a couple things. So charting a life, just as we were talking about it, when I was teaching kindergartners, school counselors, we wanted to do charting a life with the kindergartners, and they could have. And it wasn't really so much, I'm going to be a firefighter, because we're all going to be firefighters, right? But it wasn't so, you're going to be a firefighter, you're going to need this. It was more, maybe someday you'll want to be a firefighter, maybe you'd like to be a teacher, maybe one day I'll be a doctor. And, you know, and this is what doctors do, and this is what people do. This is what firefighters do, and, you know, it's good for you to know these things. You know, I think to me the goal of education is to leave all doors open. When they graduate high school, they should have and then the other thing I just want to talk a little bit about is coalition and non-coalition. So I've talked to, I've been working on early childhood throughout the area for a while. I've talked to superintendents, and I have found some superintendents who weren't really sure the difference between coalition and non-coalition, and that sort of this is just how it was when I started, and you know it's working. We know how it works. So I don't know that superintendents, but every superintendent has questions. The difference between coalition and non-coalition, I think they sort of inherited it, it's just that way. But everybody's doing something that works. But I wonder if there's an opportunity to explain that a little to school districts, see if anybody wants to do it just.
That would be a good topic for the superintendent's meeting, because I'd be curious, when somebody comes, I just know that when somebody comes in, then we have new superintendent, yeah. I read in an article that, what was it, the past couple of years, that 7 different superintendents have left the 22 districts that we have. I mean, we got, they haven't been here for a while. And so they inherit something. They don't know what's good or what's not good. They don't have a risk benefit. If I do this, it's the way it's always been, and this is the reason why we did it. And these are the reasons why it might be better to do it the other way. Well, they've never had a chance to sit down and look, and they've got tons of other stuff.
And maybe this was the best decision.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't that time.
And maybe in 2024, and there's a better fit.
And I say that also because I also find superintendents when they come in, they don't know if they want to keep SSD. They see that as an option. Until they find out the dollar amount. Yeah, until they find out the dollar amount, say, well, whether you don't keep it or not, you're still not getting the money. Then all of a sudden something changes, you know. Why it's a great idea.
Director Scott, we can definitely look at B&L too, and we talked to them.
I think they're
Thank you. Thank you. We thank you all for being great participants today, and we'll take a quick, how many minute transition?
5 minute break. Everyone go get something to drink, go to the bathroom.
5 minutes. We'll start back at 7:05.
Yes.
No, I don't.
All right. Good evening again. We're waiting on Mark. Good evening again. I am Shahida Moore, Chief Officer, Partner Districts, and for this presentation, my colleagues will introduce themselves. Starting with Dr. Gates.
Good evening, President Petrol, Vice President Cuneo, Dr. Macklin, Board Director. I am Tammy Yates. I am one of the Executive Directors of Partner Districts.
Good evening, Board. I am Chad Lentz. I'm the Executive Director of Partner Districts.
Tonight, we're going to be presenting information to you, giving you some insight on the partnership agreement as well as the collaboration tool. It is our goal that by the end of this work study session, that as board directors, you'll be able to connect with stakeholders and help them to understand the partnership agreement, the purpose of it, the purpose of the coordinator principal collaboration tool, as well as make some connections between the agreement and the principal collaboration tool. And then we also want to take a look at that through the lens of engagement in our climate results. And again, this information should help you to be supportive with those questions as you receive them from constituents throughout the St. Louis County region. For the sake of this activity, you should have this work activity sheet, and we're going to ensure that we use this as our guide for this presentation, okay? So we want to ensure that you capture any questions and notes here. Let's take a look at this document. When we get to number 11, we'll have an activity, understanding the 7 categories of the partnership agreement. And following that, we will take all questions at that time. So please be sure to capture all of your questions so that we can take those questions at that particular point in time. When we get to slide 17, we'll have activity 2, and then we'll go into Q&A again. And then our last Q&A will be at the end, slide 25. So to the right of each of those areas, we ask that you please take this as an opportunity to capture your questions and notes so that we can have a good transition through this work today. Ready to get started? All right. And so we wanted to ensure that as we work with our directors, there are 22 directors supporting partner districts across St. Louis County, as well as our early childhood directors who just presented. We want to ensure that we have a purpose and that we understand what our culture is as leaders, as a director-leader group. This summer we did some work and we were able to identify our purpose and our culture. We started with compassion and integrity, and we will collaborate with and support partnerships to ensure success for all students across St. Louis County. And this was something that was established and created amongst this group. What does this look like, and how would we see this in action? And that goes to support, you might be a director in Riverview Gardens, but you also should still support a Jennings School District, a Parkway School District, a Lindbergh School District, et cetera, when we're talking about supporting students with service delivery as they may transition from one district to another, but also looking at it from the perspective of staffing and staffing needs. And how decisions for staffing moving from districts may impact service delivery and those things. And so we want to ensure that as a leadership group that we take that into consideration. And so our culture is one of collaboration and student focus. Our future work includes us making some connections with the DEIA team to really help us to advance some of that work behind our purpose and culture, and to ensure that we're all on the same page, because oftentimes we don't get to visit other partner districts and we only know what takes place within our own environment and demographics. And so this will help us to begin to open up St. Louis County and be able to see those perspectives across the board. We have, again, 22 districts. Dr. Yates and Dr. Lentz both shared with you that they are now working as executive directors supporting partner districts. Each of them, the executive directors support 11 districts each, and you see that information provided to you on the right. As the chief partner of partner districts, it is my responsibility to ensure supervision and collaboration. I also support early childhood, disproportionality, and Special Olympics. The executive directors are those boots on the ground individuals that are providing that supervision, collaboration and support to directors and coordinators and staff in each of the 11 districts that they have oversight of. And then we also have established coaching this year, and so we want to ensure that through our professional development initiatives and practices that we are actually doing the work that we have, we participated in those professional development opportunities. And through that, we spend at least one day out of the week in partner districts, coaching, not evaluating, not formally observing, but making those connections with staff, with our students, as well as with our families. And so that may look like being present in classroom settings. It might look like being present in meetings, supporting with initiatives within those districts, et cetera. We started this practice this year, and I think that it's going fairly well. I've created my coaching schedule for the entire school year, and it is mapped out by regions, zones, and travel groups. I was able to connect with more than probably 80% of the districts. The liaisons was my first group of individuals that I connected with for coaching. The executive directors have worked directly with each of the directors in their districts for coaching and working with them, as well as coordinators. Dr. Macklin has even taken the initiative to be out on his coaching days supporting partner districts, and he will send us an email and inform us of the districts that he will be visiting and the classrooms that he will be visiting, as well as specific staff. And so there are some opportunities for us to truly drill down and to do those things. Additional members of our executive leadership team are also participating in those coaching days as well. They can go in isolation and or they can go with us in partnership so that we can continue to strengthen our partnerships throughout St. Louis County.
Go ahead and take this slide. Before we move into the partnership agreement, which is the next section of our presentation, you may recognize this graphic that was previously introduced in a presentation by Susan Henry when she went over compliance components in August. We felt that it gives a really good visual representation of how all the components that govern special education align with each other. So starting with IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, the federal level, the statutes and the regulations, which then trickles down to Missouri statutes and the Missouri State Plan for Special Education, as well as our standards and indicators, which are components that govern our special education process. Then comes down to the local compliance plan, which in simplistic terms is really an abbreviated model of the state plan, followed by then the general assurance document and district policies and procedures. This is where it gets down to the local level. As we know, special school district is very unique in that we are a dual district system, so we have not only special school district, but also the partner districts. So the general assurance document, our policies and procedures, really outline matters of direct, joint, and separate compliance. So special school districts, as well as the partner districts, are very clear and aware of what their responsibilities are. Whether that be joint responsibilities, each of us have separate direct ones, and then how we work together. Some of the areas that are covered in that we do have direct, joint, or separate compliance would be child sign, our evaluation and determination of eligibility for special education, how we develop IEPs, our procedural safeguards, and our least restrictive environment, because many of those, as we know, that is a team approach, and we both have responsibilities in those processes. Tools that we have developed in conjunction with our partner districts that we're going to talk about tonight are the partnership agreement and the principal coordinator collaboration tool. Next slide, please. So we're going to go ahead and jump into the partnership agreement. Next slide, please. In your packet, you also have a copy of the partnership agreement that we are going to go ahead and utilize here shortly. The partnership agreement contains 7 categories that we felt were important to make sure that we have ongoing partnerships to ensure that students with IEPs needs are met in the partner districts. And those are staffing, which is pretty self-explanatory, which we look at our staffing and how we staff to meet students' needs. Our teaching, learning, and accountability, which gets into those constructional components and what we both do to make sure that our students are getting their learning needs met. Section 3 is the collaboration of responsibilities and resources, and that's kind of where it comes into play, the local compliance plan, the general assurance document, and the principal coordinator collaboration tool, because that's kind of where we dig into our administrators with special education, our boards, our superintendents, really seeing and utilizing these documents and these tools to how we can effectively partner. Section 4, student services, which kind of gets into our related service areas, technology, those type of things. Data and technology, pretty self-explanatory, but that can get into how we share data, how we access data, how we provide technology to not only meet students' needs, but also support our staff, so we can make sure that we provide them with a free and appropriate public education. Transportation, how we partner with our partner districts, because we have our specialized transportation, but we do have some partner districts that provide their own. And then finally, career and technical education.
So I am going to explain kind of what this table is, although it might be pretty self-explanatory. They are the results of a spring baseline. So all of the districts had got together with, usually it's the director and the liaison that get together, and they go through all of the indicators and they rate themselves, their partnership. That rating can be on a scale of 0 to 3, 0 being it's not yet in place. For a 3 would be a positive outcomes have been noted, and it's actually been in place for a while. And so what you'll see there is the columns, the different categories, and the scores underneath that is the average of all of the indicators under that category.
I don't think those aren't equal intervals. You can't.
What do you mean it's not an inter, it is, it's a Likert
One is
scale,
not,
basically.
one is not flat. It's not, you can't say that 1 and 2, that interval is the same as between 2 and 3. Because those aren't equal intervals, you can't add and subtract those. Or divide them.
Are you questioning the Likert scale or the fact that it's
Yeah,
Likert
I can't, I'm saying the Likert scale, you don't know those are equal intervals, so you can't do that mathematically. That's, what you got there is not, maybe ordinal data, but you don't have data that you can.
It's as good as any other Likert scale at the end. I mean, it's basically, it's either it isn't, kind of is, sort of is, or more is, and is.
You might want to check with your, see here, this is 1, 2, 3, you can't add and subtract those. Those, I can't say that 1 is the difference between 1 and 2 is the difference between 2 and 3. Because of that, you can't do those mathematics. You can give me those numbers, but the average, you can't average them.
And we'll take a look at that information.
You might want to check with your staff people. They'll tell you that.
Okay.
You got to have equal intervals before you can do that. Otherwise, you only have ordinal. What you got is you got ordinal data. You can't do that with ordinal data.
Right.
Any other questions about the data?
Ordinal data. What, can you explain the term that you're using there?
Okay. When you have, you add and subtract something, okay, when you add them, you have to have equal intervals. Or they're just ordinal. To add and subtract, you have to have ratio data. They don't have that.
An example of ordinal data is yes and no. So if yes is 0, no is 0, and yes is 1, and you average it out 0.5, that doesn't it doesn't tell you if the answer is yes or no. Is that a fair way of saying it?
It's not the column data, you're saying it's the indicators.
The average.
The 1, 2, and 3.
What I'm saying is 1, 2, and 3. If you're going to use that in a mathematical way, you have to be able to say that those are equal. If not, you can't add them because it just doesn't make sense.
I love what you're saying, Dr. Canoe, and that's way above that assessment is not part of my repertoire, but I will say we definitely will take those down because I think when this was originally created, the creators of this were probably not.
I'm not knocking it, and I'm not trying to.
Good.
No, I'm just saying,
Good insight. Yes, good insight.
You do that.
Yeah,
We appreciate it.
yeah, we appreciate that feedback.
Thank you.
I've got a question. Yes, so just to back to where we were a second ago, so one could be something like 25% implemented, two could be 50% this way, and then we do the 11 numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, if we had it behaviorally defined with numbers of what it was, I could do it, but I can't do it here.
So, as I'm looking, I see a lot of variance. I see that, that the baseline scores in Hancock are, really high. And I see that in Riverview, I think that's the lowest number. And, so what kinds of responses?
So I can explain where some of this variance comes from. The partnership agreement, because we do it each year, and sometimes it's not always a progression where it keeps, because we have administrators change, we have liaisons change, and so it's kind of a calibrating tool, which is why we do it every year. And the goal is, where are we at baseline at the beginning, and we hope to grow the next year. And so there's a couple different factors. We can break this down even further and get down into, because each of the directors do this with the liaisons, and they go through each of those criteria and have those discussion points. So we could definitely get all of that specific data to you.
I think I'm more interested in your response.
Some of the variation too has to do with the partnership. And so if it's a new partnership, they tend to measure themselves being lower than a partnership that's been there. So like Hancock Place, our director and the liaison have been working together now for several years, whereas in Riverview, it's not only the liaison, but the director are brand new. So they're looking at it together going, I'm not really sure, we're just developing this relationship, we're working together on this. So that explains some of that variance, and we see that also through the principal tool, the principal coordinator tool.
So what does your team do when there's a little?
So you will see that we do have some, as we get further in this presentation, we're going to talk about some of those focus pieces, and so that will be coming up very shortly. Dr. Lynn brought up some good factors. Hancock does have some of the highest scores when you look at those indicators, the scores for each of the indicators going across the board. And as he mentioned, the liaison as well as the director, they have been in that district for quite some time. When you look at Riverview Gardens, as he indicated, they are both new to the district this year. So when we're looking at these baseline scores, this is for spring 24, this is going to help enlighten us at the end of this year to be able to see what does that progress look like. And we have identified some focus areas to support those districts. And when we look at individual districts and their particular scores, those are those conversations that we have specifically with that district. But we're also looking universally across the county, what are some of those areas of focus as well.
Now, are these scores, who is making this score?
How is the score?
Yeah, how is the score?
So this is captured through their the metrics that, when they complete the questions, that are listed within the partnership agreement at the end.
No, who is they? I'm sorry, yeah.
The director and the partner district liaison.
Okay, so those two individuals.
As well as other stakeholders, they should also capture additional stakeholder voices, which should include staff, families, et cetera, in those conversations.
The reason why, what I'd like to see also in a partnership, and I'm sounding now like a broken record, because I've said this a couple times at different meetings. I'd like to see not only our culture looked at, I'd like to see the culture of that district. Because I think that permeates our ability to staff there, our ability to keep staff there. And I don't think it just deals with us.
Absolutely.
I think that the fact of whether a district is losing a ton of their own people, we can't get people there. I'm not sure that's entirely on us anymore.
And that's why we're going to make those connections to the climate and engagement.
Great idea.
So that's how we're going to ensure that we're capturing that.
Yeah, I'd love to see our staff not only say about how they're doing with us, but also like to see how they're doing with that district.
And as we get further through this presentation, we'll talk about it. And you all are not following the directions that you guys.
I remember
Go ahead, Dr.
You're right.
I'll take your
Kids
question.
behave and it'll be okay,
Yes,
right?
I'll take your question and then we'll jump back on track.
Just something I'm seeing, and I would think, when just looking at staffing,
Sure.
we monitor the staffing of how many open positions we have in every district. We're well aware of our shortfalls in some areas.
Absolutely.
But when I look at the data here on staffing, I don't see that reflected. I look at Lindbergh, that's been staffed pretty well, but yet they're only at 1.67. And so I get concerned about, is it really reflecting what our directors are doing out there? I think they're doing really well in some places. I think in others, yeah, we could shore that up. But I'm hoping we're taking in other data.
Absolutely. And this is not just about directors, this is about our partnership.
Right.
And taking a look at those specific indicators, understaffing that you have listed there, and how we both connect and collaborate, and how we both see those practices in place.
Yeah, because if I'm from that district, I want as much help as I can get.
Absolutely.
And so I want to make sure we're not skewing things based on what we want as opposed to what we need.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, the next slide is a few of the specific indicators, and you can see the category in the first column and then the specific indicator in the second column. And these are the indicators that were the lowest scoring. So just wanted to identify those. As we move forward, we will be talking a little bit about our focus areas, these being some of those really specific things that we identified as areas of opportunities.
All right. And so, Dr. Lynch just shared with you what that summary of data, some of those data points are. We know that looking at some of those specific indicators are going to be extremely important. Those are all less than 2 when we're looking at it from the scale. We know that transportation is one where we can ensure that we're looking at that agreement to ensure that if we're providing transportation and or if that partner district is providing transportation as a related service, that it is supporting the needs of our students. The same kind of goes with staff, and one of the pieces that was key is to ensure that there is a review of the collective bargaining agreements for SSD in each of those partner districts. So, for example, as I was out connecting with liaisons, that is one of those topics of discussion that we did have, helping them to understand that they must have that background knowledge of our collective bargaining and joint resolutions in their districts to ensure that our teachers are supported in that way. So those are just a few pieces of summary information, but then moving over to our focus area, how do we put this into to action? Our goal is not to establish any additional plans or strategies, but to look at the practices that we already have in place and to ensure that they are being utilized with fidelity, that they are being practiced with fidelity. And so this helps us to first identify, understand, and know that there are definitely some opportunities to continue to enhance the work of the partnership agreement and to ensure that it is taken seriously by both SSD as well as our partner districts, and ensuring that that level of knowledge is there, not just at the district level, but at the school level where it matters most, and then also within our communities. Connecting with our governing council members was one of the recommendations that you have provided to us in the past, and ensuring that they have this knowledge and that they review and sign off on these pieces. The other key piece to this, some of you have attended board meetings in our partner districts where they are actually presenting their information to their partner district, talking about the action steps that they have established and developed based upon their ratings. And so this is full transparency. These are opportunities for us to continue to do the work. We do have these conversations in our superintendent roundtable, and our superintendent does take this information very serious. We also ensure that we provide them with these scores for their district as the information is completed. They receive that information directly from us so that they can know across the board for each standard and indicator, how they have, measured their district. I don't want to say perform, but measure the progress within. Here are some areas for, the partnership agreement. We know that continuing to have that annual review of the partnership agreement is important, but that collaboration that I talked about, understanding that, for transition, that we help them to understand them, our partner district colleagues to understand the Chart and the Life, as well as focusing on academic success of students with disabilities, post-secondary. What does professional learning look like for them? How are we ensuring that, number one, there is collaboration, number two, the resources that we have available, such as instructional coaches, effective practice specialists, and such, that they have a clear understanding of how they can be utilized in their district and how they can support their partner districts. Also looking at MTSS, are there opportunities to ensure that they understand the resources that we have available and how we can be a resource to them as well in these areas. Most importantly, for those districts that may be identified as disproportionate, ensuring that they have a true understanding of the evaluation components. And this was something that was also noticeable in a few of the board meetings that I have attended. It's our responsibility to ensure, just as we're educating you, that we educate board members in our communities to understand the referral process, because many people often think that you can just pick up the phone, call us, or send us an email, and we can just complete an evaluation and make it happen overnight, and that's not the process. And I think that them not being informed with this information may not support those that are in need of receiving those services. We also, through our partnership agreement, we want to ensure that we really engage with each of the districts to support CTE, and then how are we looking at that climate and engagement, like Dr. Cuneo stated? How are we measuring that feedback with our administrators and looking at the climate to ensure that it is conducive for all, and understanding that we are guests and we want to ensure that as guests that we're coming in to comply, but also to be partners in those areas. All right, I think we are now moving into our first activity.
Yes, so we're gonna dig a little deeper. Sorry. Yeah.
No question.
It's okay, it's not a. So first we're gonna, we can stay seated at the table first because you're gonna need to do a little bit of writing. So if you don't mind, I was gonna put you guys in groups. So Director Sartorius and Mueller, you're going to focus on staffing.
Good.
Okay, and you have a copy of the partnership agreement. Director Staten and Director Asner and President Potroff, you guys are going to focus on section 3, which is collaboration of resources and responsibilities. You have Vice President Cuneo and Dr. Suda, who are going to focus on section 4, services. You do have a paper copy, so if you could please flip to the section for your group. We would like you to take a few minutes to read that section. You all have Post-it notes in front of you. If you could please take a few moments to read that section that was assigned to your group. We want you to come up with 3 aha moments or 3 ideas, things that stand out, and write those on the Post-its.
Do we come up with those 3 as a group?
Nope,
Or on our-
individually.
Okay.
Like per area, have about minutes, read and to capture your information. 1.5 remaining.
Can you define what you mean by aha moment?
An insight, question, a realization, something that you weren't anticipating. Apologize, I did not provide more.
Realize, insight, five. We all there? I think you got about 15 seconds.
You know,
Can come back together as you transition your thoughts. Dr. Yates, you want to give them the next?
Absolutely. So once you are finished with those Post-its, if you can come up to the board that has the title of your group title and put your Post-its on the board.
I should probably write it over here.
And I will go ahead and give you next up.
It literally just says it while I was reading. Do
Yes.
you want every question on its own Post-it, or?
Up to three.
Three.
Yes, up to three. You can put it on the same one or on separate. It really does not matter.
At this time, you should be transitioning to the board with your information. Does anyone need any extra time?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And then if you can, if you don't have additional Post-it notes with you, if you can tap, bring your Post-it notes, so you can transition to the second part of this activity once everyone is ready. Dr. Cuneo, if you can come up and join us when you're done. Yeah. All right. All right, so do we have everyone? So within that group that you,
All right, so what we would like you to do is take a moment with your group and read what you have on those Post-its, and then take you a minute to discuss what would be your connections as a board member? How is your role as a board member connected to the same themes, any implications, how we can support our communities, anything further that you would want us to know about any decision-making or suggestions?
take a look at the area that you were assigned, and then you're going to participate in the gallery walk and connect with those other areas. And we will shift in this direction from 1 to 3 and 3 to 4, and 4 to 1. So first, have conversations with your group, your partners. Found with you, observe.
So that follows, it's hard to say for the item. I think their question is more for like, is it not qualified? Right. A partnership. And check, or if they're executive, they should be I think getting reminded that, so, I'm following
Unfortunately, I thought it was responsible for all. No, it's ten.
Yeah.
We don't use functionality. Maybe that's what. I never heard that before. I didn't know I had any responsibility.
Or anything you like to add, that you see that might have been an aha or insight? All right, 30 seconds, and then we're gonna go ahead and transition back to our seats for discussion and questions. All right, we can have everyone go ahead and transition back to their seats. The conversation is really All right, and we're going to spend 1 minute at this one, and then we're transitioning back to our seats.
like to know the change. And if it's not, they might like to know.
All right, and we are transitioning back to our seats at this time. 5 seconds.
And everybody has a different definition of what they think it is.
All right, thank you all for being great participants in that activity. Are there any questions for this first section? I have one. Yay, we're doing coaching. Administrators, I think that's phenomenal. 2, so on the summary of partnership agreement data slide, you said, you were meeting with district liaisons and like, conversations around them understanding the JR, and I was like, can you give me an example of like a lack of understanding or a misunderstanding of JRs? And I was like,
I think it's more awareness,
okay.
of them to be informed of some of those specific highlights. So for example, when we come out of, collective bargaining, anything that's new, we want to ensure we highlight that information for them to clearly know that this is new information, or if it's something that has been brought to our attention, perhaps by, the union and or our staff, those are additional conversations we would have.
Got it. So that could be like before and after school duty or things. Okay,
All
got
of
it.
those things,
Got it, okay.
absolutely, those day-to-day functions.
You know, and I was saying earlier, it's really hard. And we're saying, well, yeah, we should bring that in if something changes, but think of the number of new administrators every year in all these different buildings. It would be nice if we had some kind of cheat sheet or something that just outlines, because no one's gonna take the time to read a notebook. But,
And that's why we give them the highlights.
yeah, we need the highlights, and we need to be able to say, you know, our staff gets extra days, for bereavement, what have you. Your staff may not, but they need to know the difference and why that's allowed, and so forth. And the other thing, I think, our special ed teachers really feel the work, because not only do they attend the special school district staff meetings, but they also attend the regular teacher staff meetings. And they have to be part of 2 different groups constantly, and that's just a lot to deal with. And, you know, I used to tell my special ed teachers, you're not doing any bus duty, you're not doing this, because I want you in the classroom being ready for kids and ready to go. You've got a lot more materials, you have to get ready. We'll take care of that, you know. But it's that kind of balance you need to really be striving for, and I think that's the problem, is we don't have that expectation. The other thing I look at is IEPs. Our staff is inundated with paperwork, setting up goals, having IEP meetings, and yes, they're supposed to attend, but in most IEPs I go to, there's one teacher, not 6 or 7 high school teachers, there's one teacher, and they represent all the teachers, and you're lucky to have a counselor. And so it's kind of like, there's a partnership there, but yet, are we really doing ourselves service? And I think it's sometimes a blame game.
So we have started an interesting conversation. I want to look at the staffing. Why is staffing sometimes so challenging? You know, what and we started asking whether or not our
And that is a factor that we have.
Can we also get the exit, can we compare the exit interviews of our staff and then the staff of that district? I'd like to know the difference.
That's a big ask.
Yeah, that's what I want to share that. I don't know. But
If I know I'm not thinking on northern districts or any district, but what if you found out if they were the same? What would that, that tells you something. It tells you something completely different than if you have two disparate remarks of why people are leaving. I mean. and
You're
it's
saying,
got-
what if you found out that the reason why staff were exiting from both districts
Yeah.
were the same?
Yeah, for the same reason. What happens
So,
if we, if they've got 5 people that are leaving from that place that are in leadership spots, and we have a certain number that are leaving?
I think,
Maybe the reason could be the same.
sure, I think that some things that we can do is ensure that we are providing the climate and engagement survey to our partner district leadership and extending that in conversation, detailed conversation, starting with our superintendents first. This is what our staff are indicating in your district, whether things are great or if there are opportunities. So yes, we do have that piece in place. I think that we've also added, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, some questions specific to partner district, climate, leadership, et cetera, that's a part of the climate engagement survey that will help us to capture that information where we may not need to go out and ask for that, but we'll have some level of insight from our staff to measure to some extent what that might look like. Okay? All right.
I have a question.
Sure.
Where, is there, do our partnership agreements encapsulate or somehow include the process by which students are transferred from partner district to one of the SSD schools and also transition back potentially?
That would be under collaboration of resources and responsibilities if we wanted to look at it from that perspective, but I don't know specifically verbatimly if we say anything about transition to and from.
Is there, I'm just curious, because it seems from the outsider perspective, it seems like there's a wide variety of practices, and there are situations where I run into, again, I'm not privy to the discussions on the school district side, but it seems like there's situations where students are being suspended to the point where they get to a manifestation hearing, and they shouldn't be getting suspended. And the only reason that I can imagine this is taking place is because, again, I'm imagining the partner district is trying to signal to SSD that they cannot handle the student's needs in their district. And it shouldn't get to that point. So I'm just wondering if there's an articulated process for those discussions to happen.
There is an articulated process for that, where there is a change in placement process that must take place that includes the partner district and them providing all of the interventions and steps that they have taken to address the student's matters. It also includes us taking a look at if there is a need for a more restrictive environment and if those services can be met where they are. And so our practices do not allow us to have a pipeline of students entering into our SSD schools. And so we're very strong in our conversations about ensuring that we provide those services for students where they are. That's our utmost conversation. I would be highly concerned of districts if they are practicing the suspension of students with the assumption of thinking that it would allow them to transition to an SSD school, because there will be impacts on that district potentially becoming a disproportionate district. And so we've met with many districts that are identified as disproportionate, and we go in great detail with their data points and how their practices may impact their status of disproportionality and or not. And when we see that there are areas of concern where we may see a high number of individuals that are making those requests, those processes are streamlined and addressed through our deputy superintendent and other individuals as well. So I feel pretty good about not having a pipeline to our institution.
I think regards there, if that's the data point that we want to look at.
I'm just curious, again, there have been times when I've just scratched my head and said, why in the world do they do it this way?
I've absolutely heard administrators believe that there are strategies to get around special education process, and I've said multiple times, it does not work.
Again, it kind of goes back to the level of knowledge that a school administrator may have, and we understand that as principals, if they don't have a special ed background, that their background of special education may be limited to what they were provided, in their, collegiate courses. And so we know that it is our responsibility to then support them in these areas, and we did institute the Principals Institute. It is a day where principals are able to come together throughout the county in the summer, and we do have several topics that we discussed that we identify as hot topics or necessary topics for us to cover. And that also does include a keynote component over SET process. And so we are trying our best to approach that. We know that we cannot control 22 districts and 266 schools, the leadership of those buildings, but it is our responsibility to provide them with the knowledge and the resources to support students that we serve in their district.
Should a parent approach a board member, sorry, I think my kid is, where in the district leadership team slides to whom should we direct those?
First, it's going to be the coordinator and the director. If it's coming from a parent, they should be contacting the coordinator first. From the coordinator, it should then go to the director, executive director, myself, deputy superintendent.
Because I will say, it is how our coordinators and our directors support our partner district administrators, because even though a student has an IEP, they can still be held to the student code of conduct. Where we support and come in is when we have those good relationships, the principals will consult the coordinators and ask really deep questions about how are we supporting the student? What type of supports and services are we providing? Do they have a behavior intervention plan? And it's really, is in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension truly going to meet the need we're looking to meet? Or is the student going to be able to make that connection? Or are we just doing that because that's just what we do when kids engage in that behavior?
So we can't collect data if they're not there.
Yeah, so it's really trying to open that dialogue to make the best decisions for a child with a disability. And how do we bridge that gap between, because our goal is ultimately not for that behavior to happen again, but that may require instruction, that may require additional support, and suspension may not get. So that's kind of where we come in for that support. You're welcome.
All right, we're going to go ahead and move into the principal coordinator collaboration tool.
Okay, next slide, please. So just the purpose of the collaboration tool and the importance of it, it really is a tool to promote that collaboration between the principal and that coordinator director. It allows them to sit down and have that face-to-face connection and work through that relationship and those focus areas. The big areas that we look at, communication and accessibility. So how are those administrators going to connect? Are they going to have regular meetings? How are they going to get in touch with each other if they need to problem solve through something? As you know, many of our administrators, they have multiple buildings. Some of our secondary coordinators, if it's a large high school, may only have one, but we have many elementary coordinators that could have 4 and 5 buildings. So they are splitting their time. So it's really talking about, if I'm not at your building that day and you need me, what is the best way for us to connect? Understanding coordinator principal roles and advancing the organizational vision and priorities. How are they going to engage in that collaborative decision-making? In one of our conversational groups up here, I can't remember which one, we were talking about how sometimes sitting in IEP meetings, there can be dissenting opinions. And so really it's that coordinator and that principal talking through, if we get to that point, how are we going to agree to disagree, and how are we going to do it professionally, and how are we going to support each other for the greater good of meeting student needs. Partnership and hiring, evaluation, and developing staff. It's also the principal coordinator collaboration tool. It supports opportunities to collectively address those barriers. So it kind of gives that baseline, where are we, where do we want to go, and how do we get there? And then it also allows that if there's hiccups throughout the year, or maybe they realize that they thought they were one place but they're struggling, then they can come back to the table and kind of talk through that, pull out the tool, and it can kind of help guide their conversations. It's also connected to the partnership agreement, especially looking at category 3 of collaboration of resources and responsibilities.
Some of those focus areas, specifically for the principal coordinator collaboration tool, we know that, and some of the questions that you have prompted today leads us into this same area of focus. We know that there is a need for targeted professional development for decision-making as well as problem-solving, because oftentimes, we may have those situations, and again, this is why this tool exists, so that we can ensure that we're on the same page. How should decisions be made? Dr. Asner asked about the SPED process and the role and the responsibility of the general education administrator. Through these efforts, it's our goal to ensure that we are supporting. So again, going back to the Principals Institute days, but also looking at individualized needs of our leadership as well. We want to ensure that we establish clear communication protocols. Someone brought up earlier, Dr. Saturis, about staff working in partner districts that may have that special ed background, and the roles and responsibilities of a special education educator compared to a gen ed educator is totally different. So how do we ensure that everyone understands the roles and the responsibilities of our staff and their accessibility? There may be times when a partner district wants our staff to participate in supervision of students or bus duty, et cetera, and we want to ensure that at the same time that we are able to manage our work responsibilities that are a priority as well too. Regular evaluation and feedback. We want to ensure that there is consistent use of the collaboration tool for ongoing evaluation of how we collaborate, and how do we ensure that there is feedback from all stakeholders. That was the question I think Dr. Asner may have asked, like who's making the decisions and measuring our progress with the partnership agreement, but also with the collaboration tool. We want to ensure that we are capturing stakeholder voices in these conversations as well too. And then support for staffing practices. This kind of goes back in sync to what we saw with the partnership agreement and some of those measures. We know that staffing is one of those things. We provide staff for special ed, and partner districts provide their staff in the general education setting. We want to ensure that we both have those opportunities to make connections, to provide feedback to each other, but to also understand what does that feedback look like and how is it supportive of us supporting teachers and staff providing services in our districts. And how do we also work in collaboration to attract and retain staff in partner districts by ensuring that climates are friendly and conducive and safe and healthy for all, but also what measures are we taking to ensure that we're recruiting the best teachers to come into our districts and staff. Okay? I think we might be getting, like somebody has a question. We want to get through activity 2 real quick, and then we're going to do questions. Dr. Matthews looks like activity, another activity. And we'll make this one quick. All right. So activity 2, how does the partnership agreement interconnect and support the principal collaboration tool? So we want you to take a moment to look at those key areas that were provided to you. Can you do something, you guys?
No, I apologize. I was looking for the paper.
On, sorry, I'm trying to get back. Slide 14. Take a look at slide 14, as well as slide 7 and 14. How do you see connections in these areas? And we want you to just individually, just take a moment to capture no more than 3 responses, and then we're just going to have you to capture that information in a group of 2, and we're only going to spend about 2 to 3 minutes on this activity once we go up, okay? Are you all clear? Slide 7, slide 14. What connections do you see, and how do you see the partnership agreement supporting the collaboration tool?
They are right now? Yeah.
Afternoon. You know, it's getting late. All right. All right. Dr. Couture, thank you for leading the colleagues to the board. All right. Thank you. Yes, y'all, just take a look at the information once you're there, and then we're just gonna have one person to just share out from their group versus moving around. There are three, so stay with your group that you've been with. For the sake of time, that's what we have to be board. You guys up here, dinosaurs.
You ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Did you want to bring your post-its up? Dr. Couture, where's your post-its? Is this your group? Okay, so you and your group, put your post-its here. That's okay. And then we're going to have a conversation together real quick about your insights. You want to have one spokesperson speak out and share. We're almost 6 to the clock. Yes, have an also, yeah. But it's, whatever they're doing. You did a really good job. That's right. You did a good job. Thank you for sharing. All right. So we'll start with this group here. We'll figure out, want to share out who's your spokesperson.
Okay, yeah, so we definitely saw the overlap in the collaboration here. Partnership. In 2 minutes, I tried to say the same thing, but right before I hear that, but I was asking, and there's been an effort to align partnership agreement and that tool, the partnership agreement doesn't do the indicators of that collaboration to allow our
we're kind of saying the same thing. We felt like the cart was the horse, in the sense that collaboration is happening to develop team effort, administrative support together. Say, hey, also when something comes up, and they something like five proactive, that every out there.
What we said was, we felt the things that we saw connected was just a sense of accountability, but that it could be subjective. And so having data to back up, because there should be space for real stories, real situations, reflection, but it should be aligned with data. And so it's like, so transportation, right? So it's like, if you were like, oh, we have this one incident with transportation, but if we look at all of transportation, is this incident happening in a lot of places, or was that a one-off?
I think you all brought up some really good insights and aha moments. It's important to remember that a partnership agreement is that overarching, and the principal collaboration tool falls within that, under that collaboration of resources and responsibilities. The purpose of that principal collaboration tool, coordinator collaboration tool, is to ensure that at the school level, the real work is taking place, and that there are opportunities for that door to be open for both to come together and have some type of structure to support them with the conversations and with actions that should be taking place versus being told what to do or having those assumptions of what to do. And so the coordinator principal tool did receive some level of input from stakeholders on both sides to ensure that we were capturing those pieces that are necessary. This is our first year, was last year, of utilizing that tool. So we're interested to see how, as we continue to work, how it will support those needs at the school level, but also ensuring that there's that full transparency to measure in all of those buildings.
So how are you measuring?
So that goes back to, there are, the same type of way that we have the rating for the partnership agreement. We do the same thing with the collaboration tool, where the principal and the coordinator are able to sit down and have those conversations about things that are taking place that are those specific indicators.
I would recommend that you're dealing with a nominal, possibly arguing for very best. So if you do a listing of what works and what doesn't work, rather than trying to add and subtract it. 94 minutes.
Agreed. Thank you.
You can also present this, what percent of the month? That would be, that would be.
Yeah.
I think we have one area left. Cover. And we will be done. All right, and so this is now on our last area, and we want to ensure that we do have some time to talk about our climate and engagement data.
So real quick, just to explain the next 4 slides, what we have is the data from the fall and spring surveys from last year. We have teacher results and parent results, and what is reported is the percentage of agreement or positivity on, I believe it's a 5-point scale, so the percentage of the ones that agree that this was a positive thing. Based on those different categories, and of course, under each of those categories is separate indicators, but you can see this is a heat map, and so what it's showing is the green is showing the areas, the categories in the districts that had higher levels of positivity. The darker the red color, the lower the positivity for those indicators. So give you a minute to just kind of glance through that. You'll see that, again, it's teacher and para ones for fall and spring.
Some other key points to, share, from the survey results, well, not the survey results, but the survey that is active at this point in time now. We have added, some additional questions, specific for partner districts. There are 6 questions. The first one is, I feel supported by the partner district principal and other administrators at this school. My partner district principal fosters a shared vision and a sense of community and cooperation at this school. In my partner district school, the atmosphere is one of mutual respect among general education staff and SSD staff. My partner district principal effectively communicates important issues that affect me. Staff at my partner district school work together to ensure an education, student-centered environment. And last, the administrators in my partner district work collaboratively with SSD administration. So those are the questions that we will now be able to capture some level of insight for each of the districts that we support. And if I am correct, we can drill this down to the school level and individual level. All right. Clicker is ready to end the day. All right, this is it.
We're done.
All right, and so a lot of the information here, we've talked about, the communication, the staff leadership relationships is nothing new. Those professional learning opportunities are quite similar to what we discussed in some of those other areas, ensuring that, our partner district leadership understands and they utilize resources that we have in place that has been proven in certain spaces and places that if we work collectively, it will support across the board. And then I just listed some of those pieces so that you can see that through those professional learning areas as a focus, we have the scoping document. This is one that supports, that informs of instructional supports that are offered by SSD. Our focus on instructional as well as staff learning opportunities in those areas that are listed. And then professional learning plans are created for each of the partner districts as well, too. And then we have the Principals Institute, and we had the Disproportionality Summit this past summer, and we'll continue that work as well. And that brings us to the end of our discussion, and I think the presenter is done. We'll take any final questions as we wrap up.
I have some question about the, I built that.
Yep.
Is there a rule by any chance that if you're a new principal, like if it's your first year being a principal in St. Louis, that you have to go to the Principal Institute? And
We've asked.
I think that's been a growing question. As a matter of fact, the dates for the Principal Institute was given out almost a year in advance, and just so we can try to secure those pieces in collaboration. But I strongly encourage it, but that's a pretty big ask to mandate that for individuals. So we will continue to work with those, partners from those pieces to try to continue that we have all voices.
Any other questions?
I do. First of all, I'd like to say your presentation's been great, eye-opening. Second of all, I'm making an observation, surveys here at the end, and I really feel a lot of this is cultural. If you look at certain groups, I'm not going to point out certain districts or anything, you'll see a high percentage of dissatisfaction in certain areas and so forth. But I know for sure some of that's the leadership, higher up. And we're going to have a turnover in superintendents in 2 years. And I think it would behoove us to really target that partnership philosophy early on with those new superintendents and really kind of, you've shared some real helpful information. I could tell you off the top of my head which districts they are, but you can see that for yourself. There's some real cultural things in these districts that I have seen for years. And I think with the right person, working with them and so forth, with new leadership, I think we can really make some changes in the next year or two with it. They had to keep it going. Am I saying it right?
Absolutely.
I'm wondering if you come to that same conclusion. How would you characterize your approach? By the way, thank you for this presentation. It's been great as well. How do you characterize your approach when you see heat on the map in the fall and in the spring? Well, do you have a different approach depending on the time of the year?
So I will tell you one way that we are focusing on that this year, because we really want to dig into that staff engagement and staff retention and making sure that we are building those relationships. And we, through our coaching, having those conversations with our directors about what their data looks like, and then utilizing that to drive their professional growth goals as administrators, as well as looking at a staff engagement component, whether it be a separate goal or action steps through their district plan. So each of our directors are charged with working with our admin team and developing a plan for their partner district on what they're going to focus on special education-wise. And then in addition, like I stated, that growth goal. And because the same expectations that we have as district leadership with coaching, that also trickles down to our directors and our coordinators getting out and doing that coaching also and building those relationships to help that increase those positive staff engagement results. Another thing we've done, like Chiquita shared, those additional questions that we had about partner district. One thing that we were finding previously with the survey is when it asks to give feedback and answer those questions in relationship to your supervisors, that some staff were taking into consideration partner district administrators also, and we were wanting them to focus on their SSD coordinator and director, if that makes sense, because that's what we can control and drive those action efforts towards. And so we are finding there was a little bit of confusion there, which was the purpose of delineate. So we're hoping with those additional questions that we will pull out more specific information for that.
It sounds like what you do in the fall, is the spring different? After you, is there a different approach after you, at the end of the year? Or is it pretty much the same sort of collaborative efforts?
Well, we do those consistent collaborative efforts. It really just when we have those two data points, when we do it in the fall for that baseline, then we do it again in the spring, allows us to see what progress we have made and maybe where our trajectory needs to change, because maybe there's new concerns that have arisen in the spring that maybe weren't in the fall. So just drilling down. And like I said, our administrators can pull this data. They can look at individual questions, what the responses are, that the panorama data talks about if there's been increases or decreases, and they can kind of dig down further into that.
So these are feedback results. They're pretty busy slides. Were the targets changed between the fall and spring semesters for some of these? Because it looks like sometimes scores dropped, but the color map improved, so to speak.
It's important to look at the actual percentages versus necessarily the color when you're looking at individual districts on the indicators. I think that tells you a little bit more. Like you said, it either increases or decreases. Sometimes we do see a decrease from fall to spring, and then we use that spring data to plan for the next fall and hope that we can bring those up.
So the number goes down, but now the color on the map is different because you're comparing it to
the other districts.
Is there a way to, because I think when I look at it, at least what I'm really trying to do is compare, and maybe I'm doing this wrong, but I'm trying to compare the fall to the spring, and the fact that again, you know, if 33% is dark red, and then it goes down to 31%, which I assume is worse, so now it's white, that confuses me about was there an improvement or not.
It's what it's telling you is it's relative to the other districts.
Yeah.
And so as you see if everybody's kind of decreases, you still want to know where you are relative to those other districts, because that gives you some information as far as did you improve in comparison to the other districts. If everybody goes down, like let's say 5 points, but you only go down 1 point, maybe you did a little bit better than what was anticipated. That's kind of the power of that power, and but I do understand. I had to break it down.
Yeah. If everybody becomes super unhappy, then it looks like everybody got better, but actually everybody got equally worse.
Right, yeah. We all got unhappy, but you got unhappier more.
Wow. That's it. That's it. So
Dr. Cooney brought up a point, which was, and I know we're closing here, but Dr. Cooney brought up a point, which is cross-referencing the panorama survey with the principal collaboration tool. And that could be different perspectives from different individuals. For example, I think he highlighted one of our partners that was very high in communication with the principal collaboration tool. And then when you looked at them, our results was not. And so that could be different pieces that really need from the individual taking the survey.
Thanks. I'd like to thank you. This is a lot. It was a lot of good stuff. We appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the opportunity to engage, to share our perspective. A couple of questions. First of all, I like your new questions on panorama. I think they're great answers to some of the questions that we've collectively said. I think those are good additions. This is panorama. I wonder if you, I don't know if you can look for other formats. I know I've used panorama past, and I believe that you can pull up charts that will allow you to see change over time on a single chart. I was doing, Dr. Asner was doing this, and see what changed from one time period to the next over year. And the ones I've seen will give you a percentage increase, and they'll also prepare you, compare to, I think it's in the baseline study. That kind of data. And then I know Panorama does prescriptive responses for students. Are there prescriptive responses for school culture for staff as well?
Not sure, but I do know, like, when you're talking about the data though, when you get into it, you can spend hours and hours and hours just drilling down onto like individual questions, like, and so it's really hard to even bring it to a group like this and say, this is kind of what we're showing, but yeah. There's a lot of information in there.
Yeah, I have seen a format where you can sort of watch over time. I think that would help. Our trial.
Could be supplemental, doesn't have to be PowerPoint.
And I'm sure that as we provide those panorama results, that capture your quest in that presentation.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? We all want to go home? Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.